fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Sense of pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Sunday evening edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody, by the way, because we're about to get serious here really quick, do hope everybody had a great holiday weekend. It's that time of year. Hope you spent a bunch of time with friends and family. That's actually why I've been pretty quiet, just a lot of time with family. And I was watching everything. I was observing everything, but we are officially back. The rare Sunday night episode. You know, I'm so appreciative of all of you who kind of tagged me. Hey, Torres, where's the Sunday morning show? But as we got to Saturday night and Lane Kiffin still had not made a decision, I said, you know what? We got to push it back to Sunday evening. And man, am I glad that we did, because we're going to talk Lane Kiffin, the man who knows nothing other than ugly exits, with frankly his ugliest exit yet. We'll discuss that. From there, we will talk about all of the big moves on the coaching carousel. Auburn has a head coach. I think Auburn fans are pretty happy about it. Arkansas fans have a new head coach. I don't think they are very happy about that one. And oh, by the way, Adam in the chat says, Torres, Summerall's your boy. Give us some good Florida coverage, so we will have plenty of that. And then finally, I guess at some point we got to go ahead and talk about the actual games on the field on Saturday and Friday and throughout the week, right? Well, we won't do kind of the traditional breakdowns. Instead, I think the focus will be on this. I believe heading into this championship weekend, 11 of the 12 college football playoff spots have essentially been wrapped up. I will tell you who I think is in the big field going into next weekend and who has some work to do, and the 5 teams that I actually believe are in the mix for the final spot. So we'll discuss all of it before we get started. Couple reminders. Make sure you're subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos every single day. We really do appreciate your support. While we were away, I was looking at some numbers. Really am blown away by how this show has grown. So if you are not subscribed, now is a great time to do so, as we are closing in on 67,000 subscribers heading into December. I think we can get to 70,000 before the end of the year, but cannot do it without your support. No support we appreciate. Our friends and our hotel and casino partners, Circa Casino, Circa Sportsbook. Okay, if you watched the show last week, I was at Circa all week long. I was at the Players Era basketball tournament. So, you know, if you're an Auburn fan tuning in, a Florida, we had a lot of basketball coverage last week, but I was at Circa all week long. And listen, when you're on the West Coast, best place anywhere on the West Coast to watch sports, right? Circa Sportsbook, biggest sportsbook in the world. Stadium Swim is unbelievable. But here's the great news. I know that some of you can't make it out to Vegas. Now, that's not the great news. But what the great news is this. Circa has now opened up a brand new sportsbook at Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky, to bring you all of the best of Circa Vegas out on the East Coast. I'll tell you a little side story. I'm actually going to be in Nashville next week. I'm swinging by Circa Casino, Circa Sportsbook, Mint Kentucky Downs. But the bottom line is, all of the same great hospitality that you've come to expect in Vegas is now available in Franklin, Kentucky at the Mint. Again, it's 35, 40 minutes from Nashville, an easy drive on an NFL Sunday, on a college football Saturday. We're now going into college basketball season. You don't need a million apps. You don't need to download this. All you got to do, go to Circa Sportsbook at Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky. They'll take care of you. Tell them Torres sent you. You want to do me a favor. If you head out there, tag Circa Sports and Aaron_Torres so they know that I sent you. We appreciate the support of Circa Sportsbook, the official sportsbook and the official hotel partner of the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, buddy, it is a busy Sunday in the world of sports. There is no more time to waste. So, folks, let's go ahead and do it. Let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day. Do I need to tell you? Do I need to tell you what the topic of the day is? Okay, we're not breaking down whatever, Florida State to lead the show here. We are talking about a story that I think has captured everyone. I mean, every sports fan has an opinion on Lane Kiffin, what happened in the lead up to Sunday, what happened on Sunday, what happened going forward. And so let's just go ahead and dive 2 feet in to this conversation. It is one of the craziest stories I've ever seen, okay? So as we record, Lane Kiffin, I believe, is actually on an airplane to Baton Rouge. He has officially accepted the LSU head coaching job. He is officially not coaching Ole Miss in the playoffs. By the way, Pete Golding, what a plot twist, is now the full-time head coach at Ole Miss going forward. This is one of the craziest stories I've ever seen, but I think more than anything, what it speaks to is this, is that, listen, there's going to be a day, probably tomorrow, probably on Monday, where we start talking about Lane Kiffin, LSU football head coach, and what he can do for that program. To me, is not that day, though. To me, today, the story is pretty straightforward. This is maybe the ugliest exit we've ever seen. This is maybe the ugliest exit we ever will see. And there is only one person to blame. It's nobody at Ole Miss. It's nobody at the NCAA. It has nothing to do with the calendar. It is 100% on Lane Kiffin, who I believe acted like an embarrassing, excuse me, right in the middle of my rant. I feel like Lane Kiffin acted like an embarrassing, petulant child who wouldn't get his way. And so I'm not here to defend Lane Kiffin. I'm not here to make you feel sorry because of the calendar or the... No. Lane Kiffin has acted like a child, and 2 things can be true. He is a great football coach, and we will evaluate him at LSU on what he does on the field. But his exit from Ole Miss is the ugliest exit I have ever seen. And that's saying something for a guy that left Tennessee under literal riot conditions, okay? And so by now we don't have to go through a lot of the semantics of everything that has happened. But I will say this, part of the reason we did not go live on Sunday morning was because he had that meeting set for 9 p.m. Central Time. And I knew in my head, I said, that's not happening in the manner that it is, okay? So let's go ahead and just big picture what happened, big picture what it means, okay? So first of all, listen, let's give credit to a few variables here. One, we knew coming into Friday that Lane Kiffin, we expected a decision from him on Saturday, right? Regardless of what happened in the Egg Bowl, it had clearly been established that Lane Kiffin, if he did not commit long-term to Ole Miss, was not going to be the head coach for the college football playoff. Keith Carter, the AD, made that abundantly clear in his statement about 10 days or so ago now. And so we all knew what the stakes were going into the Egg Bowl. Credit to Ole Miss, they get the win. And I can be critical of Lane Kiffin off the field, but on the field, he had his team ready to go. They were the deserving Egg Bowl champs, and I believe they are a deserving college football playoff team, something that we're absolutely going to discuss here in a few minutes, okay? What also cannot be denied is that basically everything that has happened since the second the Egg Bowl finished has been a complete S show, okay? Probably started, I guess it would be, in the post game. It wasn't even the post game. I think it was on the field when Lane Kiffin is going after a reporter. Apparently a reporter called him a hoe, or he claims the reporter called him a hoe. The reporter defended himself. He said, I didn't call him a hoe. I said he was acting like a hoe. So that happens. Then we get into Saturday. We're waiting for this decision. And I'll even defend Lane Kiffin a little bit, right? Is that it was clear 2 things. One, that with the Texas A&M loss on Friday, there was the possibility that Ole Miss was going to play for an SEC title. And so you started to hear the rumors of he brought his staff into the office. They're starting game prep on Georgia, who they would have played in the SEC championship game if Alabama had lost the Iron Bowl. What also became apparent was that he was kicking the can down the road, trying to avoid the inevitable. It was clear by the end of the day, he was not coming back to Ole Miss. And I think what became clear, I'll give Ross Dellinger from Yahoo a ton of credit. I thought he had the best details on this story. There was a meeting between Keith Carter, the AD, between Lane Kiffin, and between the school president. And basically the subtext, if you read Ross Dellinger's report, was pretty straightforward. That subtext was, Lane Kiffin wants to coach in the college football playoff. Ole Miss has drawn the line in the sand. They have said no, and he is throwing a fit like a big little baby. Okay, I don't know if he could be a big and little baby, but whatever baby you want. If it's a big baby, if it's a little baby, give him a pacifier, give him a bottle, because that's how he was acting. And then it obviously went to another level on Sunday morning. We're supposed to get this meeting. It doesn't happen. And then guess what starts to get reported? Lane Kiffin, who clearly has lost all leverage, he's not going to get his way, he's not getting what he wants, is now threatening to pull the entire offensive staff on the plane with him and basically pillage the coaching staff going into the college football playoff for Ole Miss. Even if he wasn't going to be there, this moment should have been a celebration for one of the greatest accomplishments, maybe the greatest accomplishment in Ole Miss football history. You know, I've heard reports, people believe this might be the greatest moment in the history of Mississippi sports. Well, I bring it up because it has largely been ruined by Lane Kiffin. So that's what happened on Saturday into Sunday. By Sunday afternoon, we saw the videos of Lane Kiffin getting on a plane. We saw his statement, and I want to spend half a second to read his statement. And it is worth noting, by the way, that Pete Golding has officially been named the head coach at Ole Miss. That isn't even as an intern, but that is as a permanent head coach. But let's go ahead. I want to read to me Lane Kiffin, what he said and what it means, because to me, it is very clear that this guy has not changed at all. Okay. So this was a statement from Lane Kiffin. I did not send it to Matt, so I apologize. It's not on your screen right now. Lane Kiffin sent out this message at 3:03 Eastern time on Sunday. After a lot of prayer and time spent with family, I made the difficult decision to accept the head coaching position at LSU. I was hoping to complete a historic 6-season run with this year's team by leading Ole Miss through the playoffs, capitalizing on the team's incredible success and their commitment to finish strong and investing in everything into a playoff run with guardrails in place to protect the program in any areas of concern. My request to do so was denied by Keith Carter, despite the team also asking him to allow me to keep coaching them so they could better maintain their high level of performance. Unfortunately, that means Friday's Egg Bowl was my last game coaching the Rebels. He wrapped by saying, well, I'm looking forward to starting to a new start with a unique opportunity at LSU. I will forever cherish the incredible 6 years I spent at Ole Miss and will be rooting hard for the team to complete their mission and bring a championship to Oxford. So listen, again, I apologize that we don't have that statement on the screen, but at the same time, just listen to what Lane Kiffin said. I was hoping to complete a historic 6-run season with this year's team by leading Ole Miss through the playoffs, capitalizing on the team's incredible success, blah, 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 blah. My request to do so was denied by Keith Carter, despite the team also asking him to allow me to do so. Listen, I could go on. I could read that statement a second, third, and fourth time. But if you read the statement and if you read the subtext around the statement, what Lane Kiffin is trying to tell you is pretty clear. Don't blame me. I'm not the bad guy. I wanted to finish what I started. Well, I'm going to say the exact opposite. There is only one bad guy in this situation. It is Lane Kiffin. And as I said, this is as ugly of a departure as I ever remember. Okay, so a few things are true. Let's go ahead and dive in. Let's switch gears to, I gave you the context. Let's talk about what's happening now, okay? One, I have said from the beginning, Lane Kiffin should do what is best for himself and his family. And if that's going to LSU, that's fine. If that's going to Florida, it's fine. You know, if he wanted to go coach my alma mater, UConn, I would have gladly accepted and probably contributed a little bit to NIL, okay? But the one thing I also said was this, is that there is a right way to do things. There is a wrong way to do things. And the way that Lane Kiffin planned on doing things clearly wasn't going to hold up. Because I remember talking about this 3-4 weeks ago. And Ole Miss fans are like, listen, he has a standard. He will not talk about other jobs or consider other jobs until after the season. I said, listen, he can do whatever he wants. That ain't how it's going to work. Because as the weeks went on, the questioning started getting more aggressive, and it was clear he was going to have to release a statement, okay? And he was going to have to make a decision, and he was not going to be allowed to coach deep into the playoffs. And so to me, I don't blame Ole Miss. I don't blame the calendar. I blame Lane Kiffin because he should do whatever he wants, but he should also understand this. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. And, I think I said this on the last full show we did Thursday, Friday of last week, whatever. I guess it would have been Wednesday of last week. I can't remember. But what I said is that to whom much is given, much is expected. And if you want to take the LSU job, you should take the LSU job. But just because you've accepted the LSU job or you want to accept the LSU job does not mean that Ole Miss is in any way obligated to allow you to coach the team, okay? And so let's go ahead and dive in because I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding because, listen, go ahead. Go find the last 3 or 4 days. I thought it was an embarrassing about 4 or 5 day stretch for the media. First of all, it is worth noting, let's just get it out of the way. Seemingly every prominent media member is represented by CAA and maybe Jimmy Sexton as well, who is also Lane Kiffin's agent. So I don't know if Jimmy Sexton is orchestrating this, but the bottom line is the messaging from the big voices in college football was pretty clear. This isn't Lane Kiffin's fault. It's the calendar's fault. And what's the harm in letting him finish the job? Well, listen, I wish that the whole world was rainbow and sunshine and pots of gold at the end of the rainbow. But that ain't the real world, and it was never realistic to let Lane Kiffin finish the job. Why is that? For people who don't understand, why can't he just finish the job? Let me just lay it out for you as simply as I can, okay? Wednesday of this week is high school national signing day. In other words, it's the day all these high school stars sign their letters of intent and we find out where they're going to play college next year, okay? Can you imagine those players that are committed to Ole Miss right now that had Lane Kiffin not decided to leave would have signed with Ole Miss? Now imagine a world where Lane Kiffin is still the head coach of Ole Miss, but also has agreed to become the head coach of LSU going forward. Imagine being one of those players, right? You're committed to Ole Miss, but you want to play for Lane Kiffin, and you really committed to play for Lane Kiffin. Now imagine the situation that Lane Kiffin is putting himself in, Ole Miss in, and those kids in, right? Because imagine if he is the head coach at Ole Miss and he's also like, oh, by the way, don't sign here. I'm leaving in a couple weeks. And maybe he doesn't explicitly say that, but that would be the insinuation. By the way, I'm guessing we have some Tennessee fans in the chat. Everybody remembers how it ended at Tennessee. If you remember, he left for USC, and you probably don't remember, but he left for USC on the first day of the semester, or I believe it was the day going into the first day of the semester. And Coach O, who was on his staff and was clearly going with him to USC, was literally texting recruits, do not show up at class tomorrow. Because once you show up at class, you're committed to Tennessee throughout this semester. If you don't go, you can follow us to USC. You're not technically enrolled at Tennessee. And so imagine the predicament that Ole Miss is in. You have a guy who is actively recruiting for Ole Miss, coaching your team. You have high school signees signing this week. And then here is the other thing that I've mentioned 2, 3, 4 times. Why you cannot have Lane Kiffin coaching Ole Miss in the playoff while he is verbally or signed a contract with LSU is that, guess what? He also has access to a roster full of players that he is then going to decide who he wants to recruit and who he doesn't want to LSU. And so all of a sudden, you're game planning, let's just say hypothetically, Ole Miss plays Oregon in round 1 of the playoff. I don't know what's going to happen, right? Let's say you lose to Oregon in round 1. Now, all of a sudden, does Lane Kiffin, that same guy that he was coaching on Friday, Saturday morning, flip on the LSU hat and say, hey, follow me to Baton Rouge, plane leaves in an hour? Like, that is what we are talking about, but you can't give him access to your entire roster carte blanche for a minimum of 2 more weeks, if not more. Remember, Ole Miss doesn't play for 2 more weeks, okay? So you can't have him in the facility. You can't have him in meetings. You can't have him, walking down the hallway and winking and nodding and whispering in somebody's ear, hey, we got a spot for you in this much NIL money at LSU. It does not work. It was never going to work. And that is why I give Ole Miss so much credit in this situation. Listen, I saw Herbstreit, and I like Herbstreit. I think right now it's kind of, trendy to just kind of crush Herbstreit for everything he says. But I heard Herbstreit say on College Game Day on Saturday, Ole Miss is being emotional about this. Let him finish the season. No, it's actually quite literally the exact opposite. Ole Miss actually took all the emotion out of it. The easy emotional thing to do would have been to kind of have, high school prom, and the prom they play, at the end of the prom they play "Hope You Had the Time of Your Life." Like it would have been easy for Keith Carter to be playing "Time of Your Life" by Green Day on YouTube and sitting there saying, you know what? Let him finish this. This is the best season in school history. Let him do it. Okay. That's actually what the emotional part would have been. I actually give Ole Miss credit. I think they took the emotion completely out of it and said, no. This is a bottom line business. We're trying to win a championship, and everyone that's in this building needs to be fully focused on that. Not busy hiring a staff, not busy recruiting, not busy recruiting our own roster. Again, just think about this. Ole Miss won't play for 3 more weeks. I think I said 2. It's 3. There's a week between now and the conference championships. Then there's a week between the conference championships and a bye week for everyone. And then the playoff starts a week after that. So 3 weeks where he's essentially at LSU, putting together a staff, retaining players, talking to players. How can you I'll actually switch it and make the exact opposite argument. How can you actually expect him to keep the Ole Miss job and do that job? Surprise, surprise. Being the LSU head football coach is a full-time job. It's not a part-time job that you do in passing. And oh, by the way, you're game planning for a playoff game during that same time. And so you weren't going to be able to give full-time commitment to either one. You were obviously, with National Signing Day coming up, going to be focused on helping LSU put together the best possible class that you can. Where in the world are you going to have time to be focused on helping Ole Miss try to win a national championship? And so Ole Miss, I actually think, took all of the emotion out of it. I think they did the exact opposite. I think they said, we're taking the emotion out of it and we're focused fully on winning this national championship and moving forward. I think it was Lane Kiffin who was the emotional one, who was whining and complaining and stamping his feet. Why won't you let me finish? This isn't fair. Life's not fair. No, life is fair. The life is, you have a $13 million a year job behind door 1, and you have a $13 million a year job behind door 2. What you cannot do is choose what's behind both doors. Whatever. Whatever. You have kids, right? You can either get, the new this for Christmas or the new that. But mom and dad only have a budget for both. Well, I want both. Well, I don't care if you want both. You're not getting both. And that's all this came down to. And all Lane Kiffin did was be a petulant child. And I think to make it worse is that, listen, I understand that there was no way that he could have ended this in great fashion. I think in a perfect world, there's a way. He takes the job he wants. He finishes. That's not possible. And instead, all he did was blow up any minuscule legacy that he had at Ole Miss, and maybe he doesn't care. And that's totally okay, and it's his prerogative and whatever. But at the same time, when not only is the school not letting you coach, but now you're actively trying to submarine everything that you've built over the last couple years, that's not only bad, it's embarrassing. When you're saying, I'm going to pillage your staff, when you're telling staff members, some of these guys and girls are very highly compensated, but some of them are making 60, 70, 80,000 a year. And I'm not saying that's not a great living, because it is. But these are people that they had to make real life decisions today that are going to impact maybe the rest of their careers, right? You're either staying and finishing what you started, or you have to leave right now and get on this plane, or you don't have a spot at the new place. I don't envy anyone who was put in that position. And again, it all could have been avoided. Lane Kiffin could have taken the ultimate. By the way, you know how Lane Kiffin could have avoided all this? He could have committed to Ole Miss long term. Or he could have taken what Keith Carter said from the beginning and said, look, after the Egg Bowl, I got 24 hours to make a decision, and it's a final decision. And I can't flip-flop, and I can't go both ways. Last thought on Kiffin, a couple more thoughts on Kiffin, because I do want to wrap and talk about some of the other coaching hires, and we'll certainly get to some of your questions, and we will prioritize super chats. So go ahead and drop your super chats in here. But one, this is driving me crazy. Can we stop blaming the calendar? Like, listen, smart people are blaming the calendar, and it's driving me crazy, and I'm chirping at him on social media. I don't even care. Aaron_Torres on Twitter. David Pollock, blame the calendar. Dan Orlovsky, my fellow UConn brother. I don't want to criticize these guys. They're freaking idiots, though, okay? I'm sorry. Stop blaming the calendar and start blaming the adult 50-year-old that's acting like a child. Why is that? Here's why you can't blame the calendar. The calendar not only was never designed for someone to leave a team good enough to win a national championship, there is no way to design a calendar for that scenario. This is the new world of college football. If you have a really good team, you're probably going to be coaching into late January, into mid-January at minimum, past New Year's, okay? There is no calendar that exists that says, hey, we can just move the coaching cycle until after the season. Whoever doesn't have a coach, Florida, LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Penn State, UCLA, the second the season ends, they want to get that coach in place and start working on next year. So no, the calendar isn't perfect, but the calendar isn't to blame because the calendar is not built for somebody to have a top 7 or 8 team that can legitimately win a national championship. And I do believe Ole Miss could, with Lane Kiffin, decide to leave for another job. I chirped at Dan Orlovsky about this on Twitter because Dan Orlovsky, blame the calendar. And listen, Dan, I like Dan, but I don't know how to say it delicately, but I like Dan. All I'll say is, I think great at breaking down tape. Let me leave it there. What I will say is this, and I said this to Dan Orlovsky, stop blaming the calendar. Blaming the calendar, this is the equivalent. And I said it on one of the shows last week. Imagine if today, so we're recording here on November 30th, if Sean McVay, the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams with 2, 3, 4 weeks left in the season, if it started to break that he was going to take the New York Giants job. Now, that would never happen. But let's just work under the scenario that for some reason, Sean McVay wants to leave the Rams and take the New York Giants job, okay? With 3, 4 weeks left in the season, well before the postseason, well before Sean McVay has a chance to lead the Rams to the Super Bowl, which despite losing to the Carolina Panthers, they do have a chance to win the Super Bowl, right? If Sean McVay, if it leaked out and the Rams gave Sean McVay, hey, we're going to give you 2 weeks, but by the end of this week or by the end of the regular season, you got to decide. Are you staying with the Rams or are you going? And let's say Sean McVay gets to week 18 and the Rams are whatever, 14-3 and the number 1 seed in the NFL, whatever. They win the NFC West. If the Rams then said, listen, if you're not committing to us for this playoffs, you can't coach us in the playoffs. Nobody would be like, well, it's all the calendar's fault. It's not the calendar's fault. It's the coach that wants to leave the freaking Rams for the New York Giants. And it's the same with Lane Kiffin. Don't blame the calendar. At what point are we going to hold grown men accountable for their actions? Listen, I know I look young. I'm not as young as I used to be. Why am I the only one that was raised with some sort of decency and some sort of, hey, 1, treat people with respect, but then 2, sometimes you're not going to get your way, right? Didn't all of our parents say this to us when we were kids? The world isn't always fair. You don't always get what you want. The famous one, I used to date a girl who was a teacher. She said, you get what you get and you don't get upset. She said it to her students, told it to me every once in a while when I wasn't paying attention to her or whatever. But I just bring it up because you can't have it both ways, and stop making excuses for Lane Kiffin. And I do think, honestly, part of it is the NCAA is such an easy punching bag, right? Because if you criticize, Roger Goodell, or if you criticize Adam Silver, if you criticize Nick Saban or Kirk Herbstreit, if you criticize any individual, it could ultimately get back to them, and then you got a problem. If you just blame the NCAA, it's this organization with a bunch of offices. Nobody knows who's in charge. Like, I cover college sports. Who's the guy what is it, Baker, John Baker, Robert Baker? I don't even know who runs the NCAA. So it's an easy whatever, but stop making Lane Kiffin the victim. Whew, I could go on and on. Matt, we'll get to a couple Lane Kiffin questions in a minute. I do want to get to some of the coaching changes. But before we do, the last thing I'll say is this. I've been critical of Lane Kiffin. I think he's going to be excellent as LSU head coach. I think two things can be true. I think it was a disaster the way he left. I think Ole Miss fans have every right to be furious. But listen, I think he's going to be excellent as the LSU head coach. When we get to Monday, I don't know if we'll do a live show Monday, probably not again till Tuesday. We're going to turn the page to what Lane Kiffin is doing as LSU head coach. And I am going to be as optimistic about that hire as you can be about any hire. But today is about how he left. Today is about him being a child. Today is about the people of Mississippi gave you every single thing you wanted. And you not only left, you're allowed to leave, but the manner that you did was absolutely embarrassing. Matt, before we get to some of the coaching changes, do we have a couple good questions or comments on the Lane Kiffin fiasco? If people disagree with me, they're fine. I know a lot of people do. But let's talk a little bit about Kiffin before we switch gears. Woo! Luke says, epic gaslighting from Lane. 100%. Listen, who is buying this crap? Like, do people actually believe that he's the victim here? Do people actually believe that Lane Kiffin, a $13 million a year football coach, or I guess it's 12 according to the notes that Matt has on the ticker, why is he the victim? Why is he the good guy here? No. You know what the good guy does? The good guy says, I committed to my team. I said, we're building a team to win a national championship. And I believe, and we're in position to do it. Everything I promised you when you're recruiting is happening. So I'm not leaving. And you know what? Here's the thing. Lane Kiffin's really good at what he does. At some point, another one of these jobs would open. And at some point, if he didn't want to be at Ole Miss long term, there would be an opportunity for him to leave under better circumstances, to Texas, to Bama, to Florida, to where all these jobs are going to open again at some point. This wasn't the only time that you could leave. As a matter of fact, I can tell you this, and I think I've mentioned it on previous shows, is like, let me just put it this way. I know somebody pretty high up at Ole Miss, and I think the biggest problem for Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin did not think his team would be that good. And so when all this started, he figured, we'll have a nice 9-3 season. I won't make the playoff. I can thank everybody, and I can sneak out the side door. And then in some ways, to Lane Kiffin's credit, they just kept winning, and they just kept winning, and they just kept winning, and they just kept winning. And next thing you know, he's got no choice but to leave in the manner that he did. Let's get to a couple more questions. Love the chat. So lively. Tim says, thank you for speaking reason. Listen, I think there are certain people that think that I play favorites, whatever. Listen to everything that I've ever said. I criticized Mark Pope, the Kentucky basketball coach. I criticized Dan Hurley, the UConn coach last year. Criticized Lane Kiffin. Criticized Nick Saban. I just tell it like it is. And I don't know if it's a bunch of people that are swooping into college sports that have no context. Like Dan Orlovsky doesn't cover college football. Maybe he doesn't understand. I don't know. But like this notion that he's a victim, and this notion, by the way, that I don't know. It's so complicated. It's so whatever. I don't know if Nick Saban is getting, by the way, you know who's the biggest hypocrite in all this? Nick Saban. Because Nick Saban, never forget, 2015 into 2016, Lane Kiffin was his offensive coordinator going into a national championship game. Lane Kiffin accepted the Florida Atlantic job, and Nick Saban fired him for being distracted. And now, a decade later, Nick Saban wants Ole Miss to allow him to finish out the coaching job? No, that's not how life works. This is how life works, and I've said it, and I'll keep saying it. In life, we're all hopeful that we are presented a situation where we have two great opportunities ahead of us, whether it's a job, a career, or two colleges that you get into. But at some point, you got to pick. And at some point, you got to make a decision. Maybe it was dating. Maybe back in your day, you had two awesome girls or two awesome guys in your life. But at some point, I'm guessing one of them made you pick, or you had to pick. I'm not going to get into being married to more than one person. That goes down a rabbit hole I'm not ready to get into on a Sunday in November here of 2025. I'm just saying, at some point, you might have two pretty girls. You got to pick one. It's not that complicated. I appreciate that comment, Tim, because I feel like I'm going crazy here. Why are we all defending Lane Kiffin like he's not a 50-year-old adult that has to make tough decisions? I don't know. Let's keep it going. One or two more. Then I'll tell you what, I got a lot of takes on the so Jim says this, and it's in all caps, and this is how I feel. I want to scream it from the rooftops. What is the tagline that I have continued to say week after week after week? What was the famous Herm Edwards term? You play to win the game. You play to win the game. You won the game. And listen, I'm not somebody that's naive enough to say that in a vacuum, you do a checklist, positives and negatives of both. I do think LSU's the better job. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I don't. But what I will also say is this, is that it may be a better job. That does not mean that you cannot accomplish everything you want to at Ole Miss. And you know how I know it? It's because you're literally accomplishing everything you've ever wanted to at Ole Miss. Look at it. Competing for an SEC title. If Bama loses, you're in the SEC title game. Going to the college football playoff. Jackson Dart was a first-round pick. Walter Nolan was a first-round pick. Trinidad Chambliss, in my opinion, should be in New York for the Heisman Trophy. Everything you want is right there. And so I'm with Jim. What is the point of coaching if you're going to get to the playoffs and not coach? And that's why, by the way, any of this talk about the calendar, there's no calendar that exists that can account for a dude that has a team good enough to win a national championship deciding that he'd rather be somewhere else during that championship run. That calendar does not exist. And it doesn't exist anywhere in sports. There's no magic MLB calendar where a guy decides before the playoffs, I want to coach another job, but like it doesn't exist. So stop making Lane Kiffin out to be the victim. There are a lot of victims in all this case. The Ole Miss fans that have supported this guy blindly and given him everything that he's asked for, NIL, resources, whatever. The 85 players in that locker room that were put in the middle of this. There are a lot of victims. The assistant coaches that were told, if you don't get on this plane, you ain't coming with me and your career's over as far as I'm concerned. There are a lot of victims here. Lane Kiffin is not one of them. Thank you for the comment, Jim. One or two more, and then I got takes on Golish and Silverfield. Oh, my. Listen, I think this is a great point. Spinnerbait says LSU is going to be so mad in a couple years when Lane Kiffin burns down LSU as he leaves like he has everywhere else. Such a great point by Spinner, right? It's such a great point because just think about it. He's done it everywhere. Listen, Lane Kiffin has been around so long. I don't even remember the Oakland Raiders part of his career. But that famous Al Davis quote was making its rounds on social media on Saturday and Sunday of, basically Al Davis, who's, rest in peace. He's passed away, 10 years ago at this point, saying this guy conned me and he conned all of you too. That's how he left the Raiders. He left Tennessee under the cloak of darkness in the middle of a riot. And I'm not blaming Tennessee fans. I'm just stating it as a fact. He forget the tarmac because he got fired. Left Alabama because, again, Nick Saban got tired of him. So it's going to happen at LSU. Something's going to happen. Something's going to catch his interest. Maybe it's another coaching job. Maybe it's a college job. Maybe it's the NFL. I don't know. This guy's not built to be somewhere 20 years and get a statue. Something's going to go wrong, and he's going to play victim, and he's going to play blame. And in 10 years from now or 6 years from now, it's going to get ugly, and people will blame the calendar. Stop blaming the calendar. Start blaming the 50-year-old. But I agree with Spinner Bait, who basically said, look, man, at some point, he's gonna leave LSU under the same circumstances. Like I said, I don't think this guy is built to be at a job for 15 years. Like, he's 50 years old. I don't think he's retiring at LSU. It's gonna get weird. It's gonna get ugly. There's gonna be highs. There's gonna be lows, and he's gonna leave under weird circumstances. Because we have a 15, 20-year track record of that is who this guy is. One or two more, Matt. The questions are good, and this is one of the biggest stories we've had. So I'm not going to rush off of this topic, Matt. If we have more good questions, I'll just keep doing them. RP Mayfield says he ruined whatever reputation he attempted to repair. So this is a very important point, and I'm mad that I did not make it, okay? And I've made it throughout all of our previous shows, but not over the last couple weeks. Oh, Dan Orlovsky replied to me. We'll see if I get to that later. I got to look at it later. Okay. So this to me is an important thing, okay? I've said this consistently. I've said Lane Kiffin is 1,000% allowed to do whatever he wants as the next head coach. But spare me I'm a changed man. I don't drink alcohol. I do hot yoga every day, and no. At your core, you're the same freaking dude you've always been. Now, listen, if there's health issues or personal issues, listen, if he was drinking too much alcohol and he got that under control, I'm happy for him. I want him to be healthy. I don't want ill will upon him. It's great that you're doing yoga. It's great that but you're fundamentally the same dude. So stop telling me you're a different guy. Stop doing interviews. You know, the line that he has used throughout this whole process, these are the good old days, right? What does that mean? It means that basically we all talk about, oh, remember the good old days when this happened or that happened? And his message to his team is, these are the good old days. You're in a locker room with a bunch of guys that you love. We're competing for a championship. These are the good old days. So instead of saying that and then not backing up your words, how about you just acknowledge, yeah, these are the good old days. And you know what? Guess what? I'm going to enjoy them and I'm going to appreciate them. But when you say stuff like that and then boom, you immediately default to, goodness gracious, I'm out the side door the second something else presents itself. Stop trying to tell me you're changed. You're the same dude. I'm glad you're healthier. I'm not trying to make light of if you drank too much or you exercise more. I'm happy about that. Happy that your blood pressure's down and your cardiologist is happy with you. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is fundamentally you're the same dude. All right, couple more, Matt. Got me all fired up today. Listen, this is the worst part. I'm just going to say it. This actually legitimately makes me sad. Spinnerbait says he has ruined the program temporarily. They can't even enjoy their best year in forever and have to start over now. That's the worst part. That's also, by the way, why he couldn't coach in the playoff, right? Because the bottom line is, imagine him being in the playoff and the whole conversation is about LSU. This is supposed to be a moment that is about Ole Miss and only Ole Miss. So now they're going to talk about, yeah, there's speculation that this guy is going to join them. And oh, by the way, he flipped this 5-star that was committed here who's now going to LSU. That's what the college football playoff game would be about if they allowed him to coach it. And so I feel bad because he ruined this moment. It should be one of the greatest moments, if not the greatest moment in Ole Miss history. And there's a cloud over it. I'll also say this, and this is the part that I wish was not true. I don't think they're going to be eliminated from the playoff. What I do think is it could impact them hosting a home game, right? And I'm not an economist. I don't know that. But I heard some stat. A home playoff game could have potentially brought 50, 60, $100 million of revenue to that area. That could disappear because Lane Kiffin decided, because they were going to get a top 8 seed and they would host a first round game. I'm not so sure that's going to happen anymore. And it really sucks. I hope they do. I hope Ole Miss fans get, some sort of closure of at least getting the satisfaction of hosting a playoff game. We'll see what happens. Let's do one or two more, Matt, and then we will switch gears. All right. RP Mayfield says better win international championship within the first 4 years or he's out. I assume that means national championship. And I tend to agree, right? And that's the whole thing, right? And I'll give you kind of a random example, but I always say this about LeBron James. Okay, so I live in LA. By the way, Matt just had a buddy of mine who's a YouTuber text me and say, elite thumbnail. So you're doing good work, Matt. You're doing good work. Keep up the good work. Yes. All right. So I always say, so I live in LA, right? And I'll tell you a quick side story. But I remember when LeBron James became a Laker. Okay. I'm not even a Lakers fan. My wife grew up in the LA. So, I watch him here and there. I'm a college guy. I don't like the Lakers and I don't like LeBron. But I remember one of his first press conferences, you can find it. And somebody asked LeBron, they said, what would it mean for your legacy if you won a title as a Los Angeles Laker. And he looked him in the camera and he said whatever. And I don't even think he was trying to be rude. I think it was arrogance of, what would it mean to my legacy? My legacy is set. I won 2 in Miami and I won 1 in Cleveland and my legacy is set. And it hit me. I go, oh, LeBron doesn't get it. LeBron doesn't get that Lakers fans don't care. They don't care what you did in Miami. You're being compared now to Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Jerry West and Kobe Bryant. Nobody cares that you won in Cleveland. They want you to bring rings, plural, here. And so I bring it up to RP Mayfield's point of, he says you better win a championship within the first 4 years or he's out. Lane Kiffin, it's great that you won 11 or 12 games. I guess he never won 12, but it's great that you won 9, 10, 11 games at Ole Miss and was part of the best 6-year run in program history, or at least modern program history. Think anyone at LSU cares that you just won 11-1? No, it's how quickly are you going to get us to 11-1, back to the playoff and competing for national championships. You're not compared now to Matt Luke or to Houston Nutt. You are compared to Ed Orgeron, Les Miles, and Nick Saban, 3 guys who won national championships on that campus with that program. No one cares that you won 11-1 this year. Okay, you're going to go 11-1 next year? Because we know you're bringing a bunch of players and we're giving you NIL money. And Brian Kelly, for all the criticism, there's like a top 12 recruiting class there waiting for you. You better win right away. So I think it's a great point by RP Mayfield. It reminds me of the LeBron story. Nobody cares what you did at Ole Miss. Get to work here. Maybe one more. Do we have one more good one? And then we'll switch gears because I want to talk about some of these other coaching. All right. Luke says, this is great. Lane wanted to finish the LSU season as a commercial for he wanted to finish the Ole Miss season, as a commercial for LSU football, and so he could have a chance at a natty on his resume. Sucks to suck. Ole Miss rightfully did not let him have his cake and eat it too. It's that simple. It's that simple because it becomes now about LSU. And LSU is a great place. LSU is awesome, and they're going to have success. And like I'm saying, for whatever criticism I have of Lane Kiffin, I don't think that I can deny that this is a guy that is going to have success at LSU. But imagine Ole Miss, like I said, best regular season basically ever, home playoff game, hopefully, maybe becomes the biggest sporting event in the history of the state of Mississippi. And the whole time they're talking about, well, LSU. Well, there's a report that this guy's going to LSU with Lane Kiffin. There's a report that that guy's going to LSU with Lane Kiffin. What's actually going to happen with Lane Kiffin? Who's going with him? What about LSU? What about this coordinator? What about, and it's like, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're like, I can't enjoy this. This is awful. So to Luke's point, it would have been an LSU commercial. And I don't like it, and I don't think it's fair. All right. I'll tell you what. The chat is still humming. Do you want to switch gears? Should we switch gears? Do we need to switch gears? Let's see here. Somebody did call me pathetic in the chat, so that's not good. I'll tell you what. Let's switch gears. We had 3 SEC jobs outside. Well, technically 5 total. If you include Lane Kiffin going to LSU and including Pete Golding becoming the now full-time head coach at Ole Miss. What we'll do is we're going to come back and talk about the other 3. I want to talk about Alex Golish. He's headed to Auburn. Ryan Silverfield. He's headed to Arkansas, and people are not happy. John Summerall is the Florida head coach. A lot to react to. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for day drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. Good to be back. Chat is humming. I've certainly struck a lot of chords. First of all, shout out to the guy that said, "Oh, nice of Torres to go live." Yeah, we go live like 4 times a week. I don't know what you're talking about. All right, let's switch gears because we got Arkansas fans in the chat, and there's about to be a big pig invasion to Hunter Yurichek's office. They are not happy. All right, so 3 head coaching hires that had nothing to do with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Again, if you missed the Lane Kiffin talk, we just did it. So Lane Kiffin talk. Pete Golding is officially the head coach at Ole Miss, replacing Lane Kiffin. Let's go ahead and switch gears. Before we do, listen, I don't know. We might save the college football playoff conversation for later in the week. But guess what? Maybe you're a Bama fan. Maybe you're an Indiana fan. Maybe you're an Ole Miss fan. You say, you know what? I'm not going to let Lane Kiffin ruin the vibes. I'm going to that college football playoff game when it comes to Oxford. Well, you're going to need tickets. And when you need tickets, you need to get them from our friends and our partners, SeatGeek and the SeatGeek app. Okay, so SeatGeek is America's #1 ticketing app, downloaded by 28 million people. Feel like Dr. Evil. 28 million people across the world. Every ticket rated 1 through 10 gets a green dot or a red dot. Green dot means go ahead and purchase. It's a good ticket. Red dot means maybe you want to stay away from it. But what I really love about SeatGeek is this. They take care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. They're taking care of a lot of you. I know a lot of you have used this. But if you need tickets, if you use promo code Torres, that's promo code TORRES, promo code Torres, it gets you $20 off your first purchase. So maybe you're an LSU fan getting ready for Lane Kiffin. Maybe you're an Ole Miss fan getting ready for the college football playoff. Whatever it is, SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. With that said, let's go ahead and switch gears. Like I said, 3 head coaching hires in the SEC outside of the LSU Ole Miss drama. I do want to start with maybe an unlikely one. I think you could maybe argue that on the national scale, or certainly on the interest scale, it's maybe the quietest one, and it is Alex Golesh, the former now South Florida head coach, going to Auburn, okay? And so Auburn's been kind of a wild job, and I guess all of these have in their own way, but Hugh Freeze gets fired, and listen, I said it at the time. I thought it was either going to be John Summerall or DJ Durkin, and DJ Durkin was almost like Bobby Petrino at Arkansas, where it was clear that the administration wanted it to work. Producer Matt, you could tell me off air, but my impression was I think it came down to the wire. I think if DJ Durkin had beaten Alabama on Saturday, there was a very realistic possibility that he would have remained the head coach at Auburn going forward. It doesn't happen. The Summerall stuff, John Summerall got a little bit weird. And I think the bigger picture was that it became obvious and apparent that John Cohen, the AD at Auburn, wanted the next head coach to retain DJ Durkin as the defensive coordinator. We'll see what happens. Nothing's official yet. But just, a few hours ago, in the midst of all this craziness, Alex Golesh officially named the Auburn head coach. And I'll just be real. Listen, it certainly doesn't have the craziness of all the Lane Kiffin drama. It certainly doesn't have the anger of Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas. But I think this is going to work. And I'll tell you this. I think if it hits the way it hits, this one has a chance to have the most success, the fastest. Yes, I'm talking even faster than Lane Kiffin at LSU. So let's go ahead and dive in. First of all, why do I like Alex Golesh? One, I've said it with all these jobs. I would tend to skew going the younger dude over the older guy, right? We saw it at Auburn. Hire Hugh Freeze. He's been around, whatever. But this is a rapidly changing world, a rapidly evolving world. And you get the 55, 60-year-old guy. He doesn't want to change, doesn't want to. Alex Golesh, he hasn't gotten that $70 million contract yet. He hasn't gotten the FU money. And so he's got to make it work at Auburn. And he's going to make it work in a place where everything is set up for him to succeed. First of all, he's got the resume to back it up. Listen, I know there's all sorts of talk about, how many good seasons in a row did he have? Well, first of all, has the SEC pedigree, having coached alongside Josh Heupel at Tennessee. By the way, this is probably another conversation for another day, but Tennessee fans are not happy with Josh Heupel right now. And I think you can say there is a direct correlation between Tennessee's best offensive seasons under Josh Heupel when Alex Golesh was on his staff versus when Alex Golesh left for the South Florida job. So he knows the SEC. I know he was only a head coach for 3 years, but listen, all 3 years they went to a bowl game. It's worth noting Byron Brown, his quarterback, got hurt last year. That was part of the reason that they struggled. And this year, they go 9-3 in what was clearly a very good American Conference. He proved he can win big games in tough environments. You know how I know? Went to the Swamp and beat Florida. I hate to say it, Auburn fans, he ended up with the same number of SEC wins this year as you did, okay? And so I love the hire. I love the vibe. I love the offense, by the way, balanced offense. And I understand, Hugh Freeze was an offensive guy, and I understand it didn't work out. And so you're afraid that it's going to be the same deal. I don't think it's the same deal. We're talking about a coach that's much younger, much more at the start of his career, much more younger and innovative, top 5 scoring offense in the country, and number 2 overall offense, total offense in college football, okay? So I love the fact that you got an offensive guy, you got a young guy. Here are the 2 other reasons that I really like the hire. First of all, as I said, every piece of reporting out there is that part of the holdup with other candidates is that the AD at Auburn really kind of prioritized candidates who would retain DJ Durkin as the defensive coordinator, okay? Now, listen, DJ Durkin had a chance at the interim job. He wasn't good enough. And frankly, the defense probably wasn't good enough, certainly against Vandy and to a degree against Alabama on Saturday night. But at the same time, here is the truth, is that when DJ Durkin was solely the defensive coordinator, that defense was not only elite, it was flat out insane. Okay, all you got to do, go back and look at all those losses when Hugh Freeze was still the head coach and he was calling the offensive plays. Every single loss can basically be tied to that abysmal offense and a defense that was getting the job done that got no support. You lose 24-17 at Oklahoma, very controversial fashion, given, of course, the touchdown that should have been. You give up 16 points to Texas A&M, one of the best offenses in college football. You give up 20 points to Georgia. We know how that happened. 23 in overtime to Missouri. By the way, shut down Arkansas as much as anybody did in the SEC all year. So the defense is figured out. And here's the other part. And this is all assuming DJ Durkin is staying. I don't know. We're recording here about 7 Eastern, 6 Central. I have not seen anything that indicates that something has officially been released by the school saying that DJ Durkin will be retained as the defensive coordinator. Remember, a couple things. DJ Durkin has great relationships in 2 areas that very much matter. 1, with the players on the roster, and 2, with the current recruits, right? And so with the players on the roster, how many of them went to bat for DJ Durkin and fought to get him the head coaching job, okay? A lot of them. A lot of them go back to when Hugh Freeze was fired. 2, when Hugh Freeze was fired, do you remember that night? Because I remember I was at Circa Casino out in Vegas, doing my work, and there were pictures all over social media of DJ Durkin FaceTiming with all of the recruits. Basically, don't bail on us. Give us a chance. We're going to figure things out. I want to be here. I hope to be here, whatever. And so to me, the DJ Durkin part is key because he is the guy that has the relationships and he's a great defensive coordinator. And so if Alex Golesh can handle the offense and just turn the keys over to DJ Durkin on defense, they have a chance to be elite on both sides of the ball. most importantly, not only do they have a chance to be elite on both sides of the ball, the talent is already on the roster, right? Like you look at some of these other jobs, even Lane Kiffin, and I can criticize Lane Kiffin. I think it's going to work, but even Lane Kiffin, it's like you look at his situation and there is a lot of rebuilding to do, and there are a lot of new pieces that Lane Kiffin is going to have to bring in. Same with whoever ends up at Penn State, whatever. I bring it up because most of the pieces are already there for Auburn. Deuce Knight, what did Deuce Knight have? 6 touchdowns a few weeks ago? Maybe it's Ashton Daniels that comes back and is the starter. And let's give DJ Durkin credit for another thing. Did not mortgage the future of the program to get the full-time head coaching job. He sat Ashton Daniels in that game against Mercer to preserve his red shirt to either help him or whoever the next head coach is. And so when I look at Alex Golesh, why I think it can work, he already has an elite defensive coordinator in the building, and he already has an elite roster in the building as well. I remember saying this when Mike Elko got the Texas A&M job a few years ago. Remember, Texas A&M, the job flipped over. Jimbo Fisher, for all the criticism, was an elite recruiter, and there was all this talent in the building. And I remember I coined this phrase at the time, and it was pretty smart on my part. But I said, back in the day, we always used to talk about a coach having a 5-year plan of, hey, in 5 years, when I get my recruits, this is what it's going to look like. I say now you have to have a 5-week plan. Who's coming in? Who's the staff? Who are you retaining? Can you retain the guys you want in the recruiting class? And to me, I would say out of every coach, certainly Alex Golesh, it is the most important that he has a good 5-week plan. Because if he has a good 5-week plan, guess what ends up happening? If you can retain most of that building, you have a roster that's built to make a playoff run next year. Again, Deuce Knight or Ashton Daniels at quarterback. Those are 2 pretty good options. Jeremiah Cobb, best running back. Follow our Torres on Auburn account. You'll know most underutilized guy maybe in college football, certainly during the Hugh Freeze era, still almost rushed for 1,000 yards this year. Has another year of eligibility if he chooses to use it. 3 of the top 4 receivers could be back. Cam Coleman, listen, we've already talked about it. I think there was a report 2 or 3 weeks ago about he would be the most coveted non-quarterback in the portal if he decides to enter. It's on Alex Golesh to be like, dude, I have the number 2 offense in college football this year. You're really going to leave here to go somewhere else to hopefully put up the numbers that you're going to put up with me? Perry Thompson, you go on and down the list, Malcolm Simmons. And then the defense has dudes everywhere that DJ Durkin has a relationship with. So listen, I haven't looked at the schedules for 2026 yet. I know with the 9th SEC game, it's hard. I know with the Georgia and Alabama rivalries, which will both be on the road, it's going to be hard next year. But when I'm just looking at head coach, his skill set, and the people that are already in the building, DJ Durkin on defense and the players, again, go through all of them and you see like there is a national championship roster in that building. And that sounds crazy and that sounds hyperbolic. I don't think that it is. I don't think that it is when you look at the fact that this team, most of their best players all have eligibility left. Xavier Atkins, who should be an All-American, is only a sophomore. Listen, I know some of the guys are leaving, but Eric Winters, the freshman, the safety, is a true freshman. Kyan Lee, the corner, could come back. I assume Keldrick Falk is probably going, but some of those other guys, Amaris Williams, these are all guys that were, top 100 recruits, 4 or 5-star recruits. For all of the criticism of Hugh Freeze, his 2024 and 2025 recruiting classes were both top 10 nationally. And for the most part, all those guys are still in the building. So Alex Golesh, it's time to get to work. I hope you have a good 5-week plan. 5-year plan is out the window, but if you got a good 5-week plan, you're going to have a roster that's good enough to compete for a national championship at Auburn. Let's keep it going. 2 more hires that I do want to discuss. The first one, there's a lot to discuss here. Arkansas has officially hired Ryan Silverfield, the Memphis head coach, as its next head coach. And let me just say this. I think I'm pretty plugged in the Arkansas world, in the Arkansas community. It is not pretty. It was not received well. Now, listen, there's going to be no Shiano Sunday or Mark Stoops Texas A&M situation. Ryan Silverfield is signed. He has already met with the team. Hunter Yurachek was tweeting out pictures with him. Hunter Yurachek is the AD. But I bring it up This hire is a little bit uninspiring, especially given the different twists that we thought this hire could produce. And on top of it, it's just, let me put it this way. It's not very inspiring. I'm going to defend Ryan Silverfield. He's the coach. It's an SEC job. I don't blame him for taking it. And what I will say is this. If Arkansas fans want to be mad at one person, and I think most of them would agree with me, don't blame Ryan Silverfield. I assume fans are going to support him. Person to blame is Hunter Yurachek, the AD. I think it's time to go. So let's go ahead and just dive into this higher big picture. Okay, so first of all, I think part of the frustration with Arkansas fans is, listen, this was the first SEC job to open. I think that part is easy to forget, right? Is the fact that, this job opened a month before Auburn did. It opened up 2-3 weeks before Florida, before LSU, certainly 6-8 weeks before Ole Miss opened up, okay? And by the way, partly opened up because of because of the Memphis situation. And through it all, I think there was real momentum for big names in this search, okay? So, the search starts, you're trying to figure out big names. Could it be Rhett Lashley? Well, Rhett Lashley signs an extension. Could you maybe poach a guy that's not happy, Dabo Swinney, that was probably never realistic, but you got to bark up that tree? But what I will tell you is a couple things. One, and we talked about it on the show, I do believe there was real momentum at one point for James Franklin. It might have not been for very long, but listen, I said it on the show. I stand by it. I believe that at one moment in time, there was real belief that James Franklin could happen. And as I said on the show, I can't speak for every major booster, but the people that matter, the people with the real money in that state and around that university, that was the guy they wanted. And I think there was real momentum that it could happen. And whether it was all Hunter Yurachek's fault, whether he wanted to be in the ACC, whether he wanted to stay in that geographic footprint, it fizzled really quick. I'll also say this about Arkansas. I think Alex Golesh was pretty darn close. We also, what was it? Arkansas fans, correct me. What was it? Last Wednesday morning, maybe? There was the report from the random guy. I don't even know who it is, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I just don't know who the dude was. Alex Golesh has accepted the job. And you've read all the reports by now. You know what everybody has said. It feels pretty clear to me that Alex Golesh and Arkansas were in a good spot. Alex Golesh, by the way, I know an Arkansas fan knows this, but his wife is from Arkansas. My understanding is that her parents, so his in-laws, may actually be season ticket holders still of the Arkansas Razorbacks. And so I just bring it up because I think there was real momentum there. And then the leak got out, and then they were on, the Golesh camp was unhappy that leak happened. And then all of a sudden, fast forward, he's like, dude, it's not happening. And it also, by the way, allowed other schools to get involved, most notably Auburn. So, like I said, I think there was momentum for James Franklin. I think there was momentum for Alex Golesh, and you get neither of them. You end up with Ryan Silverfield. So let's go ahead and talk about him. Because, listen, I'm not trying to bash a guy, but I do think it's fair to be underwhelmed. Now, the one thing he does have is the win over Arkansas, which basically cost Sam Pittman his job, okay? It wasn't Sam Pittman's final game. It ended up being his second to last game, but it doesn't change the fact that he did have that win over Arkansas. The counter to that is everything else that happened after. Here's the issue with Ryan Silverfield. And I understand the American was tough. John Summerall and Tulane are awesome. Eric Morris, who I didn't mention, by the way, I think that was another guy they pursued, and, it didn't work out for whatever reason. I bring it up because Ryan Silverfield is at Memphis, okay? Memphis is known as probably having the best overall resources of not only anyone in the American, maybe anybody in the entire group of five. I believe the stat that I saw some point during this whole season was that Memphis is the first group of five school, to fully invest the full $20.5 million in rev share. In other words, schools can directly pay up to $20.5 million. And you get past the SEC and the Big Ten, a lot of schools can't afford to do that. They can't afford to give the full $20.5 million. Memphis was one of the few, maybe the only one in the G5 that could. And so I bring it up because of the fact that this guy had as good a resources as anybody and just kind of was a little bit underwhelming, if we're being perfectly honest, as the head coach at Memphis. Matt, you could go ahead and pop up that tweet that I sent you earlier in the day, but Memphis ends the regular season at 8-4, 4-4 overall in the league. And you know it's a bad sign when their own fans are kind of happy that you took their coach off his hands, okay? So this is Hitmen Hoops, which I believe is a Memphis-related basketball page, but they said Arkansas AD Hunter Yurachek just saved Memphis football by hiring Ryan Silverfield. These are the stats. 3-12 against teams above 500 on the road. 12-20 overall against teams above 500. 0 AAC title game appearances in 6 years. Went 4-4 this year in AAC play with losses to UAB, East Carolina, Navy, and Tulane. Memphis fans have been begging for a change all season, and they just got it. Thank you, Arkansas. And so listen, I'm going to go in with an open mind. I've seen hires that I think are going to be a disaster that work out great. Listen, I've seen hires that I think are going to be really good that are a disaster. I thought Hugh Freeze was going to be awesome at Auburn. He wasn't. I thought Brian Kelly would probably be pretty good at LSU. He wasn't. So we all get this stuff wrong, but he's starting from a disadvantage. He's starting from a place where half of the fan base, and when I say half, it's probably like 90%, doesn't want him or believes he was the bottom of the barrel hire. I would say this, I did a video on Kane Womack last week, who I don't even think most Arkansas fans wanted, but I think would have preferred over Ryan Silverfield. The one thing I will say, though, is we'll see what happens. But at some point, we can't blame the coach. There's only 16 SEC jobs. You got to take the one that's available to you. And the person that I blame is Hunter Yurachek. So Hunter Yurachek is the Arkansas AD, okay? I have no personal relationship with him, but I have no personal vendetta against him. But I have to call out people that do a bad job at their jobs, okay? So remember, this is a guy, let's call a spade, inherited Dave Van Horn, one of the best coaches in college baseball. John Calipari, Hunter Yurachek, it goes on his resume. We all know that John Tyson, the chicken man, was behind that. And John Calipari probably isn't at Arkansas without his relationship with John Tyson. So there's those two hires, which I don't think Hunter Yurachek really gets credit for. Now, did do a good job finding Eric Musselman at Nevada. We should give him credit for that. But also, remember, the Sam Pittman hire was a total disaster, where at one point, ironically, you thought you were getting Lane Kiffin. Another conversation for another day. But this hire was doomed from the start. And by the way, you know how I know Hunter Yurachek? He's kind of embarrassing himself every week as the selection committee chair that has to answer questions on national TV. Kind of embarrassing himself every week. So I could go on and on. But I'll wrap by saying this, is that when I knew this search was doomed? Before Sam Pittman even got fired. Do you guys remember? Because we talked about this back in September, okay? So in September, it's probably week 2 or week 3. Hunter Yurachek this is the Arkansas AD, was doing a speech at the Little Rock Touchdown Club, okay? So the Little Rock Touchdown Club. It was a booster event, fan event, and we all know how those boosters events go, right? It's one of those things where you get people in the building, they want to support the team, they want reasons to be positive, and oh, by the way, you want them to give you money. Well, guess what? Hunter Yurachek goes up to the mic and basically says, yeah, I love Sam Pittman, but he has no chance to win given the current circumstances. We found the video. This is Hunter Yurachek talking about the state of Arkansas football to the Little Rock Touchdown Club. Matt, you can play the sound.
National championship in men's basketball moving forward. We know we're set up to win a national championship in baseball moving forward, and I think we're set up in several other sports to win a national championship. Football, where we are right now, we're not set up to win a national championship. I'll just be brutally honest with that. But I think we're set up to compete really well in the Southeastern Conference, especially now with the new revenue sharing model.
And you feel that's directly related to directly related to finances. That's what you feel when you say that, correct?
Absolutely. It's directly related to finances and what programs were able to invest in their teams in the past.
And so listen, I said this at the time, and I stand by it, is that basically here is the bottom line. There are only 16 SEC. I said there's only 16 SEC head coaches. There's only 16 SEC ADs, okay? And there is no coach, there's no AD in the SEC that should publicly say that, yeah, we're not really built to win championships in football. Like, even if you believe that, don't say it publicly at a booster event. Like, what are we even doing? And by the way, nobody has sympathy for you. You know why? Because look at who's in the playoff conversation. Ole Miss is going to make the playoff. There's no reason that Ole Miss has to be better than you in football. They should be your equivalent, or you should be better than them. There's no reason. There's no reason that Ole Miss should be better than you. Vanderbilt. I'm sorry. There is no reason that Vanderbilt should ever be better than Arkansas at football. But right administration, right coach, right, by the way, setup gave Clark Lee what he needed. And now Vandy's 10-2. And, listen, I hate to say it, they're probably not going to make the playoff, but it doesn't mean that they're not that they're not light years. They just had the best season in school history. So if Vandy is positioned to make the college football playoff to compete for championships, why isn't Arkansas? Like, explain that to me, because that part I don't get. So I could go on and on. I have no ill will with Hunter Yurachek, but it's time to move on, man. It's time to move on. If you can't get it right at Arkansas, what are we doing? And if you can't get it right with a 6-month head start, not 6 months, 6-week head start, where you were the only SEC job open. And by the way, there's all sorts of reports. Who knows what's true and what's not about. The presentation of James Franklin was underwhelming. The presentation, the Alex Golish thing leaked when it wasn't supposed to leak. And it's just at some point, like I said, I think fans will eventually get behind Ryan Silverfield because everybody wants their team to win. This is on the AD, though. This is on the AD. By the way, and there's the other variable that I should mention really quick, is that you also just could have fired Sam Pittman last year when there were no SEC jobs open. It's a frustrating situation. I think Arkansas fans have every right to be mad with how this ended up. Hope that I'm wrong. Don't know that I will be going forward. Really quickly, let's go ahead and wrap with the other SEC job that opened today. We were going to do, by the way, playoff picture stuff, but we can save that for later in the week. Look at that. John Summerall. This is I think he was the third guy that was officially announced on Sunday, but 5 SEC jobs opened. Talked about Lane Kiffin, talked about Pete Golding, talked about Alex Golish, talked about Ryan Silverfield. Let's go ahead and talk about John Summerall, the new head coach at the University of Florida. Okay, so Florida, listen, we don't need in any way, shape, or form to relitigate the disaster of a season that they just finished, okay? Awful season, forgettable season, time to move on, okay? But this is almost like the Arkansas thing that we just mentioned. When they eventually fired Billy Napier, a year after they should have, the whole search focused on one guy, and that was Lane Kiffin, okay? And so, listen, there are a lot of conversations to have about Florida. The fact that they could have hired Lane Kiffin in 2021 and got too cute and hired Billy Napier, I think as badly, we just mentioned it with Arkansas. They could have fired Billy Napier last year when he got boat raced 2 of the first 3 weeks of the season at home against Miami and against Texas A&M. They decided to keep him. They decided not to move off of him. And so all you were doing was putting yourself in a position to not get the guy that you wanted, okay? And so we all know the deal. Middle of last week, it became clear to Florida that the communication with Lane Kiffin was weird. Surprise, surprise. I think it's probably just weird with everybody, but they moved in a different direction. The problem with Florida, and I said this weeks ago. I remember I did a segment probably 2 Sundays ago, and I said, if Lane Kiffin ends up at LSU, who is the guy that you're going to get? And we went through the candidates, right? Jed Fish, huge buyout. Florida alum, 8-4 at Washington. I've been critical of how he left Arizona. I think he's done a good job at Washington, but he's got a $12 million buyout. You're paying Billy Napier $20 million to go away. You're not buying Jed Fish out of his contract. Eli Drinkowitz, was that really going to move the needle? And then the other big thing, and he obviously signed an extension as well, but the other big thing was with Florida, it was abundantly clear early in the process there was no plan to hire a group of 5 head coach. And the reason why, for people who don't know, aren't Florida fans, is because the last guy you just got was nicknamed Sunbelt Billy, okay? Billy Napier was the hot group of 5 coach in that moment at that time. And, everybody believed that he was the next great head coach in college football, and it was a total dud. And Florida fans, I'll give you guys credit, you knew right away. Year 2 was like, no, this ain't the guy. It's over. it's never going to work out, whatever. So I bring it up because that was the whole conversation. You're not going to get a group of 5 guy. And so let's talk John Summerall, because I will say this. Florida fans, I hope you give John Summerall until the press conference, because I think he's going to win you over. I think he's the right head coach. None of this is guaranteed. It does come with some caveats. I'll be real. I think you could have done much, much, much worse, and I think it's going to work, and I think he's going to be really good, okay? So first of all, like I said, every group of 5 guy is not the same, just like every power conference guy isn't the same, right? LSU hired a power conference guy the last time they needed a head coach. It was Brian Kelly. Just because that one didn't work out doesn't mean that they didn't go out and hire Lane Kiffin, right? Because Lane Kiffin was the best candidate. So I understand why there's hesitation about John Summerall. The counter is, I promise you, John Summerall ain't Billy Napier. Okay, Billy Napier, listen, I'm not here to tear him down. It didn't work. He wasn't a good coach, kind of a disaster. I think everything you need to know about Billy Napier is doesn't really feel like anybody's interested in hiring him as their next head coach, right? That tells you from the beginning he was probably underqualified for the job and probably just not the right fit for a power conference job, okay? But at the same time, just because Billy Napier didn't work doesn't mean John Summerall won't. And like I said, I think if you give him time, you're going to appreciate who he is and the fact that just because they both came from the group of 5, they're different. Now, we had John Summerall on the show. I couldn't find the clips that I wanted, but the one thing that I will tell you, we had Summerall on a few weeks ago. That interview, by the way, is still pinned on our homepage. So if you're a Florida fan, go find it. I got big Dan Lanning vibes from this guy. And I'm not saying he is Dan Lanning, but what I am saying is he is a guy that you can just tell when he walks in the room, when he's in front of the camera, he has the ultimate respect of the dudes in that locker room. There were 2 or 3 times during the interview where he went away from interview mode and into coach mode, and you could tell him getting fired up. And listen, I know everybody wants the flashy offensive guy in 2025, but I will tell you, he very much had that defense, linebacker, tough guy mentality, and I think he's going to bring it to Florida at a time that Florida needs it. So I think he's got the right attitude. The other thing I'll say, and this is one thing that we did talk about, this guy won at multiple G5 schools in the NIL portal era. And this was one thing I would encourage you to check it out. I said to him, do you have do you have the secret sauce? Because nobody can figure out how to win consistently at the group of 5 when you're losing guys year over year over year. And so you look at his seasons as a head coach, 12-2 at Troy, 11-2 at Troy, 9-5 last year at Tulane, 10-2 this year. He's coaching in the American Championship game this year, could be 11-2 in the playoff. And the one thing that is consistent about him is the only thing that's consistent is inconsistency. He continues to lose all of his best players, right? He had last year Darian Mensah as his quarterback. Great evaluation, great find, great development. Boom, he leaves for Duke. Well, imagine if he could have gotten that guy year over year back and the impact it could have had this year. He just goes in the portal and gets Jake Retzlaff, who left BYU. And so this guy has figured out the portal era. He's not a guy that, I think that was one of Billy Napier's biggest problems. Like, Billy Napier was out of a playbook from 10 years ago, right? We recruit the high school and we develop. And I think it works to a degree, but I think to a degree you have to be nimble. And so that's what I like about Summerall. He's won at 2 different stops, has had success in this portal NIL era where the resources haven't been in his favor. I know Tulane, and I want to give Tulane credit. He said, we're one of the best resourced group of 5, group of 6 programs in America. That's not the same as the SEC. And so to me, you send him there, I think there's a chance that he's really good. Now, we talked about this a minute ago with Alex Golish, and I stand by it here, is that I do think there is some level of the first 5 weeks. I said it with Alex Golish. The difference between, what do you call it? The old days, they used to call it the 5-year plan. This is the 5-year plan. We're going to do this. And when I get my recruits in, we're going to do that. And by year 5, now it's the 5-week plan. And I don't think the roster is quite as stacked as Auburn is with guys that have proven it at the college level. But what I will say, look at that roster. Jaden Baugh is a dog. Jaden Baugh, 1,000-yard rusher this year. I still believe in DJ Lagway. Now, if it's time to move on for everybody, I'll let DJ Lagway and John Summerall decide that. But there's talent all over that roster, right? There is talent on that defense. The O-line early in the season before it all went to hell was running the ball pretty well. You look at some of their best players. Again, Miles Graham, their best defensive player, young guy. Some of the wide receivers, right? Dallas Wilson, that went over Texas. He was unbelievable. Young guy. Vernell Brown Jr., your leading receiver, young guy. Eugene Wilson, Trey Wilson, young guy. So the only point I'm trying to make is that you're not starting, and I said this with Auburn, but you're not even starting where I think Lane Kiffin has a bigger rebuild based on the guys that are in the program than even Florida does. Can you retain the right guys? And then I do think with John Summerall, he's a defensive guy. I obviously think he needs to hire the offensive coordinator role. Joe Craddock is his offensive coordinator at Tulane. I don't know if the intention is to bring him there. I don't know if Tulane would hire Joe Craddock. I don't know what the answer is. What I do know is I do think that's going to be part of it. So I really like the hire. I do, though. I don't believe that just because John Summerall came from the group of five that he can't be really good at the power conference level. No different than I believe that if you're, whatever. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Like I said, just because LSU didn't work out by hiring a sitting head coach in Brian Kelly, doesn't mean that it's not going to work with Lane Kiffin. So I could go on and on, but I do like the Summerall hire. I think it'll be really good. Give him until your press conference. He's going to win you over. Let me put it this way. Again, I'm not just trying to bash Billy Napier, but you hear Billy Napier talk. It's about the process. It's about the organization where it's slow. Listen, I listen to a lot of Billy Napier press conferences because we were talking about him every episode to start the season when he was falling flat on his face. You hear John Summerall speak, it's going to open up some eyes. I think he is going to be great at Florida. I think he kind of has that attitude that you need too, right? Florida's been down for a while. You need a tough guy attitude. No more getting pushed around. No more getting bullied by Tennessee. No more getting bullied by Georgia. You need a guy that I think is going to be really good. And again, the talent is in the building. I looked it up before the show. 12th ranked team recruiting ranking for the composite ranking. That's ahead of Tennessee. That's ahead of Ole Miss. That's ahead of a lot of teams that you lost to. All right, Matt, we just did an hour and a half live. We will save the playoff conversation for later in the week. Really quickly, I'll tell you what. Why don't we get a word from our partners? We'll come back. We'll take some last-minute questions, and we'll get out of here. It's been a fun show. A lot has happened. Quick break. Answer your questions. Be right back. But before we do, you know what we got to do. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to go ahead and thank Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Yeah, you see the logo on the back of the screen right here. Okay, so I've told you all about Cauley Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge sports fan. And one day he was sitting on the couch and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something my kids are going to love, something my family's going to love, something I'm going to love. And so he came up with Cauley Puffs. This is the new age health food snack. You don't need to go to the grocery aisle and buy all that crap, the Doritos, the Fritos. No, my friends, you need Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But here's the best part. They taste freaking delicious. Actually, there's another best part. In addition to tasting delicious, in addition to being healthy, they are also taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Okay, so check this out. All you got to do is go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, and you can get 15% off any purchase with the promo code Torres. That's Torres, Torres. It's that simple. 15% off any purchase. One bag to try them out, 100 bags to cater a party. Doesn't really matter. Promo code Torres. CauleyPuffs.com gets you 15% off. Cauley Puffs also available on Amazon. You obviously can't get the promo code there, but CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. Thank you to our friends at Cauley Puffs. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. 3 coaching notes since we last got off air. I just went on social media for the first time since the show started. 3 quick things. 1, Michigan State, it looks like, is going to hire Pat Fitzgerald the former Northwestern head coach. I actually like that hire a lot. So who knows? Maybe we'll talk about it on a future show. That remains to be seen. Also, Lane Kiffin has officially arrived in Baton Rouge. I see Ross Dellinger posting a tweet with a recruit. I think it's Lamar Brown, who is maybe the number one player in America from Baton Rouge committed to LSU. So we'll keep you posted on that. And then the third thing is that I just saw a video with Alex Golish. He does not like to play golf. So I think that's a net positive for Auburn fans. You will not see him at the country club the day after brutal losses. Also, there is a fake Pete Nakos account reporting that Mark Stoops has been fired. I almost got duped, but not quite. By the way, there is a whole other Mark Stoops conversation that we're not going to have today. It's bad. Now, we've been all over the Mark Stoops thing. I thought he probably did enough to keep the job. I do think, though, that in my opinion, it's really bad. And I don't think when he won those back-to-back SEC games at Auburn and Florida that they thought that he was going to then proceed to get blown out in the final two games to Vanderbilt and Louisville. By the way, friend of the Air Torres pod, Vince Morrow, the new Louisville GM, was tweeting at Kentucky media members during the game. Talk about a contentious rivalry. You ever see a coach from one team tweeting at media members during games in Michigan, Ohio State? I don't think so. So I'll tell you what, it's crazy. By the way, we're not going to talk, any of the big games from the weekend. I was going to do a playoff picture thing where we kind of, talked about Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia in the SEC championship game. We'll save that for probably Tuesday, maybe Thursday's show. All right. A couple questions, couple comments, and then we will go ahead and get out of here. By the way, it's a busy week in college hoops, too. We're going to have plenty of talk of Kentucky, North Carolina, UConn, Kansas. Arkansas is hosting Louisville. So we'll have plenty of hoops on the show this week as well. All right, let's get to some of the other big questions, comments, whatever. Super chat. Chance Nichols says, Silverfield at Arkansas, 6 wins at best a year. It's tough, man. I mean, you go to that 9th SEC game, and I mean, let's just call a spade, right? Is that outside of Pete Golding, I mean, he has the least impressive resume of anyone that got hired in the SEC. Lane Kiffin speaks for himself. Some are all 3 10-plus win seasons in 4 years as a head coach. Golish just won nine games this season. Ryan Silverfield, as I said, with the best resources in the league, did not win very much, And the other thing, too, I didn't even mention, Memphis coaches coming up to the Power Four have not had success. I mean, Mike Norvell's, he had a good 2-year run, but he's otherwise been a train wreck. Florida State fans are furious that he's coming back. Justin Fuente came from Memphis to Virginia Tech, 1 good year with Frank Beamer's players, and it all fell apart. So not a good situation. Not a good situation at all. All right, so thank you for the super chat, Chance. Let's get to some other questions in the chat. We will get out of here. It's going on 2 hours already. Aaron, are you breaking my heart talking about Golish and his guys that I thought were going to be hogs? You are breaking my heart talking about Golish and his guys that I thought were going to be hogs. Listen, I'm just telling you, it's well documented. That report came out, and Golish's camp was not happy with the fact that it got out. Was it 100% done? I don't know. I think he was in pretty good shape, though. I think it was in pretty good shape. 1 or 2 more, because it's already almost 8 o'clock Eastern time. John Morgan says, I'm so disappointed in Arkansas fans' toxic attitude towards Silverfield. At least he can't go down, but only up. Glasses half full from John. When you go 0-8 in the SEC, you can't go worse than winless, okay? Now, technically, he could go 0-9 next year because you get the extra SEC game, but you can't go worse than winless, okay? I don't think it's going to be that bad. I don't. I do think, like I said, when there's momentum for James Franklin, when there's momentum for Alex Golish, When early on there's talk of Rhett Lashley coming off a playoff appearance. Could you poach Dabo Sweeney? Getting a guy that went 8-4, it's tough, but I understand John Morgan's point too of new coach, let's give him a chance. One or two more, and then we're going to go. You won me. So Phil was mad that he thought I was being too tough on Lane Kiffin early in the show. And he said, Torres, you won me back. I hate Hunter Yurachek. Listen, that's the other thing about the Ryan Silverfield stuff. Whether he's the right guy or not, very publicly, he was not anywhere close to the top of the candidate list. And it's just another ding on Hunter Yurachek's resume. It's another ding from the perspective that you butchered the Sam Pittman hire. You probably should have fired Sam Pittman a year ago. You end up, being it's bad, man. I independent of whether Ryan Silverfield works or not, I think Hunter Yurachek gots to go. One more, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. I want to get some of these clips going. Luke says, not surprised Arkansas can't get a better hire. They play one of the hardest schedules in the hardest conference every year, and it's hard to get talent there. Listen, it's a tough job. It is also the NIL world. And listen, my talking point on Arkansas, and I truly believe this, if Missouri can win 8, 9, 10 games a year, Arkansas can. If Ole Miss can win 9, 10, 11 games a year, Arkansas can. Now they got to get the right coach. For all the criticism of Eli Drinkowitz, doing pretty good at Missouri. Obviously, Lane Kiffin I can criticize, but Lane Kiffin's a pretty good coach. He's a great coach. Those schools got the right coach. So we'll see what happens. All right, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Hour 36 minutes. We'll talk playoff later in the week. By the way, as I record here, Penn State does not have a head coach. Maybe that changes by the time you watch this. UCLA doesn't have a head coach. So there's some more dominoes to fall. By the way, I think a lot of these G5 jobs, I think there's some interesting candidates. Is Ed Orgeron going to get another job? Is Billy Napier going to get another job? Jimbo Fisher going to get another job? What are my UConn Huskies going to do? So we're still going to have plenty to talk about, plus National Signing Day, plus the playoff, plus conference championship games. We're going to get out of here. If you're not subscribed, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com for questions on the show. Thank you to SeatGeek. Promo code Torres gets you $20 off your first purchase. And thank you to Cauley Puffs. Promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. Thank you to Circa Sportsbook and Circa Casino, which hosted me last week. And I will be at Mint Kentucky Downs checking it out on my way to Nashville next week as well. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick. You F-head, unblock me, bro. I'll be back Tuesday morning. Aaron Torres Pod. Appreciate all of you.